Welcome to Sea of Whales, the Whale Geek podcast, where whale watching and whale research meet. I'm your host, Shauna Prince, scientist and whale watch operator, bringing you conversations with whale researchers and ocean experts from around the globe. Let's dive in. Today, we're joined by Padraig Whooley, sightings officer at the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group. Padraig and I were first introduced in 2023 when we were notified by Allied Whale that we had photographed a whale that was the first ever Western, North Atlantic, and Irish match. So 3 countries and 5 catalogs, as your article says. And it was a really exciting time. And it's just great to have connections across the pond. Welcome, Padraig. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Shauna.
I'm going to just start off by finding out how you got in marine science. How'd you end up doing this?
I suppose my early career, I have not come at this from the traditional, go to college, do zoology, and then my earliest, I studied logistics when I was when I left secondary school, transport management, logistics. I think they call it supply chain management now. Then I started working in shipping, so there was some maritime connection there. So I was working in shipping in Dublin on our east coast, and I then became involved. Yeah, my girlfriend, I remember at the time, Samantha, broke it off with me. So I had a bit of free time one weekend, and I was coming out to Greystones, where I lived in Wicklow, and I saw a little flyer on the train station saying IWDG meeting about cetaceans in the Department of Botany in Trinity College in Dublin. So I said, well, I've got a bit of free time this weekend, and I was always kind of interested in marine wildlife. So I went, and I just thought, listening to Simon Barrow talking about cetaceans, I wasn't quite sure I actually knew what a cetacean was. But then I just realized that it just clicked somehow that this was something that I was going to be interested in. So I had spent a couple of years doing land-based whale watching out in Cape Clear Island and West Cork, without a whole lot of success, but then started off hanging out with more bird watching types who were really good at land-based distant observations.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a certain amount from them. Then traveled around the world, which took me to Canada, of all places. And I was basically spent a year and a bit following whales around the world. And my first port of call was Johnson Strait on the other side of your landmass in BC. So I spent a summer working. There was an ecological consultancy, and this was 1995, so it wasn't yesterday. There was an ecology consultancy based in Vancouver called Bion Research, and they had the contract for BC Parks to manage the Michael Biggs Ecological Reserve, which, many other, I'm not even sure if it's still called the Michael Biggs Ecological Reserve, but it's the Rubbing Beach Reserve for people who are mad into killer whales. So you've got Telegraph Cove there, which would be the nearest town, and then we were based out on a little island called West Craycroft Island, on Boat Bay. So it was a field camp, and the idea was that we were there to warden on behalf of BC Parks. There was a warden service, so we were under contract to BC Parks, and the whole idea was basically informing boat operators about, you were entering a reserve, telling them about the killer whales. I never know when I use the term killer whale. It's just a habit. Should I be using orca? Because I seem to spend half my life defending myself because I call them killer whales. I just can't bring myself to calling them orcas. It just sounds too fluffy for me. But we had an amazing summer. I kind of it was probably my first time seeing killer whales, but I had sort of wonderful memories there. A particular day, we had 75 animals come into the area. But yeah, so the whole idea of the warden service was the killer whale Rubbing Beach Reserve. So listen, that was Canada was my first port of call when traveling around the world, and then I kind of since then, or in that same year, I spent a lot of time down in down in Baja, another amazing place.
Yes.
And I went through a period in my life when I was just an inveterate traveler, going to spend a lot of time down in Patagonia as well. Again, with looking at the killer whales that were attacking the sea lions up on the beaches in at down in Chubut province in southern
Hmm.
Patagonia. Another
Hmm.
fabulous place. I don't know what it is about Wales, but they always tend to have preferences for beautiful areas, which,
They sure do. Yeah.
so Wales and beautiful landscapes and great people are something that always kind of coalesce quite nicely.
So true. So true. Just a question. Biggs killer whales, are they named after Michael Biggs?
They would be, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what would be the normal whales that you would expect to see off of Ireland on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, what I call the usual suspects and start small, working up. We have,
Yeah,
and
sure.
these would be coastal species. Obviously,
Okay.
once we, so as I said, we got 26 or 27 species in Irish
Hmm.
waters, but
Yeah.
the usual suspects would be the harbour porpoise,
Hmm.
which I know you have. You guys don't have the Dodds porpoise, do you? That's a Pacific animal, isn't it?
Yeah, no, we don't have any of those.
Beautiful, super, probably the fastest of all our cetaceans.
Hmm.
Um, Dodds porpoise, common bottlenose rissos,
Hmm.
uh, and then you're up to sort of, once you then go staying coastal, your minke, your humpback, and your fin whale. So
Hmm.
they are what I would call our usual suspects.
Hmm.
But once you start going a little bit offshore, then you've got your white-beaked dolphins, you've got, which are rapidly disappearing from our waters.
Hmm.
It's probably nearly 20 years since I validated a white-beaked,
Oh, wow.
also white-sided dolphins, which are
Hmm.
almost as rare. Again, there's something happening with these offshore animals that we're just not seeing them, and there's plenty of people doing offshore work as well, you know. Then, of course, you got your sperm whales. Now, for us to see sperm whales, we've got to really go out of our way to see them and go,
Hmm.
100 kilometers offshore. But I mean, if you put your toe in the water there in Bonavista or Trinity Bay, you probably already got sufficient water depth for sperm whales, but we don't,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we have something you guys don't have, which is a very big continental shelf. And
Hmm.
it's only when we hit that shelf edge down to 500 meters to 1,000 meters that you're going to start picking up your beaked whales, your sperm whales, your
Yeah.
pilot whales,
Hmm.
and even your blue whales. But so they're what I call the offshore animals. But the usual suspects definitely harbour porpoise, common bottlenose rissos, dolphins, minke, humpback, and fin whale. And then we have the honorary whale, which isn't a whale at all, but the basking shark. And I always lump
They're
the
just as
basking shark
exciting.
in.
Yeah.
Well, they're kind of, we do record basking sharks just because, well, we had the network, we had the
Hmm.
observers, and we just thought, rather than this nascent group, the Irish basking shark group,
Hmm.
rather than they're having to reinvent the wheel and develop their own network, we said, listen, we're all into big marine megafauna, so we'll take basking sharks under our remit. And right at this time of the year, I sometimes wish we hadn't, because I'm logging and validating more basking shark sighting records probably than I am whale sighting. So I think this is going to be another quite a busy shark year for us.
Hmm.
But there's very little validating required for basking shark records, because let's face it, if somebody sees a big 7 to 10 meter shark, it's only one species of shark, and
Pretty
that's a
much.
basking shark. We
That's
we
right.
don't do great whites here.
Yeah.
But well, not yet anyway. But there's still, because you guys occasionally would get great whites,
We
wouldn't you?
do every once in a while, especially the ones that are tagged. You'll see that they're, not very far off for sure. Yeah. So now that people are tagging things makes it so much easier. But interestingly, when I started here, my first summer here was in 1999, and we definitely had a lot of basking sharks, and it would
Right.
be very, very rare for us to see one now. So whatever is happening for them, there's definitely been some major changes. Would you say you've seen less over the years that you've been working there, or is it holding pretty steady?
Ireland is something of an anomaly. everybody everywhere else around the British Isles, and I include Ireland in that geographic sense. Some
Hmm.
people get very animated when I use the term because it's political, the British Isles,
Yes.
but
Hmm.
I use it in the geographic sense. But I'm thinking of places like the Hebrides in Scotland. I'm thinking of the Isle of Man, which is in the middle of the Irish Sea. I'm
Hmm.
thinking of the south coast of England, Cornwall. All these places historically would have been really, really good bass and shark places, and the Sharks have largely left all of them. So I mean, even there was a group, the Manx, which is the Isle of
Hmm.
Man, the Manx Bass and Shark group, actually disbanded. There was so little point in them continuing. There
Hmm.
had been so many years when they had seen absolutely no basking sharks. So we seem to now have a near monopoly. It would almost look like all of these places that have lost their bass and sharks, they're
Hmm.
coming to the southwest of Ireland, the west coast, and the northwest.
Hmm.
And we kind of have two bites at the cherry with basking sharks. We around late March, mid March to late March, we have um, the start of the late spring, early summer feeding period. Now, by the numbers are building during April, they're probably peaking in May, and around now, any week now, those numbers are going to plateau, and then by the end of June, they'll be gone, and they'll be pretty much gone until next year. So it's a kind of a short spring season of about 3 months.
Hmm.
But in the last couple of years, and it's possibly down to the numbers of people flying drones, we have a second bite of that cherry, which is in autumn. But this time, all of these sharks are swimming around with their mouths closed. So they ain't feeding.
Hmm.
And what we're pretty sure it is it's courtship related. So
Interesting.
and there's been this wonderful name given over to it called a Taurus, Torus. And these
Okay.
Tauruses sometimes can literally be hundreds of sharks in an area, but they say a
Wow.
square mile. And it's really only from drones. You can see what it is. All of these sharks swimming counterclockwise. And then under, so it's like a vortex of sharks on the surface going all the way down. So you could have 30 or 40 individuals swimming all with their mouths closed, head to toe in this carousel that's swinging around. And then you might find that there's three or four of those carousels in one relatively small area. And sometimes you
Amazing.
reckon that there can easily be hundreds of sharks in one small area, and that's County Clare. West County Clare seems to be the real hotspot. So we would love to know what it is in particular about West County Clare that is attracting these
Hmm.
sharks. And of course, we've had people over from Taylor Chappell is over at the moment with colleagues doing a lot of satellite tagging and
Hmm.
sticking discovery tags on as many and taking slime samples as well to look at DNA. So there's when you've got people, shark people coming over from Oregon to study our bass and sharks. I mean, they would say it is
Yeah.
probably bar none the best place on the planet to both see and to study bass and sharks. Yeah, we've got two bites of the cherry. The feeding event, which is now, and it's got a late spring, early summer, and
Hmm.
then nothing. They're gone for the summer, and then there's a big return later, and that seems to be around September, even October. And it's only a short couple of weeks when they're
Hmm.
back. And Of course, the big question is: are they here all along, or are they simply just diving down?
Hmm.
Maybe they're feeding, but you have to say that we think it quite unlikely that you've got thousands of bashing sharks and they're
Yeah.
all just on at depth. Our feeling is that they are leaving for those sort of months of late June, July, August, maybe early September when they're completely gone. We think they probably are gone because it's hard to miss 10-meter sharks.
Yeah.
So that's the story with our bashing sharks
That's
as to why
amazing.
exactly they have disappeared from so many of their former hotspots and
Yeah.
what it is
And why are
exactly
they
that
all
they're
there?
why are they all here is a
Yeah.
real mystery. But I'm sure it's only a matter of time before far better minds than I get a handle. And it's presumably to do with feed, and it's
Hmm.
presumably to do with sea surface temperatures and
Yeah.
water salinity. And there's just something here that they like, which is
Yeah.
great.
It makes me happy that they're thriving somewhere because, you worry about it when you have something in an area and then suddenly they're not there anymore. Are they just, are they not alive anymore or have they moved on because, their food is moved or whatever the case may be? So it's nice to hear that they're thriving,
They
somewhere
yeah,
else for sure.
I mean it's thriving. You've got to be careful. I mean, just talking to Taylor, who's got, he's been tagging sharks, and they would be tagging quite a few sharks, and when they're downloading the data, and they can see the dive profile, there's a considerable amount of evidence that some of these animals are getting caught in fishing gear, and you can
Mhm.
tell by the profile of the dive that they go down, and they're not coming up again. So fisheries bycatch is a problem
Yes,
here. And I
absolutely.
know from divers, especially last summer, who got into the water in the area where there were lots of, courtship tourists, and we always associate the breaching as well. A lot more breaching sharks than you would typically see during the feeding period. So,
Yeah.
but they got into the water, and almost the first thing they saw were basking sharks drowned on the seabed in bottom set gill nets. So,
Mm,
yeah, it's not all great news. We
no.
there is a bycatch that we are kind of cautioning. Is it sustainable?
Mhm.
And the early evidence would suggest that if numbers like we suspect continue to be caught in fishing gear, we may well find that the basking sharks, it's a mortality that is not sustainable.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why we need to protect our basking sharks.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I mean, numbers like that, and breaching basking sharks, never seen that before
Yeah,
either, even when we did have quite a few here. So, wow, add that to
yeah.
my bucket list for sure.
Well, at
Um,
this time of the year, because this, especially April, May, when it's kind of really pre our whale season, because our
mhm,
whales start really rocking up in sort of more May, June period. But I very early on in my period validating cetacean sightings in Ireland, it always struck me as odd how many people report breaching whales in Irish waters, especially Irish waters that I live right next
mhm,
adjacent to. And I'm
mhm.
thinking to myself, there's something odd here. We really haven't got whales, and minke whales, humpbacks, they haven't really arrived yet.
Gotcha.
And every
Yeah.
Tom, Dick, and Harry is watching breaching sharks, or sorry,
Mhm.
breaching whales. And as you quiz them, you
Yes.
realize, yeah, they're mistaking. And the key thing is, when I explain to them, you could be watching an empty expanse of ocean, and you can always tell when it's a shark, because all of a sudden, completely unannounced, you get
Yeah.
this big breach
Yeah.
and a big splash, and that's it. The
And
event
then
is
nothing
over.
else. No blow.
Nothing,
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
before and nothing after. So I
Mhm.
said that is a typical classic breaching bastard shark. Now it may breach more than once, but obviously if you're watching a humpback whale, you don't just see it breach. You've been watching it
No.
for 15, 20 minutes
Yes,
before. It
exactly.
does all that
Exactly.
behavioral repertoire, and
Mhm.
after it breaches, it usually does a tail fluke.
Mhm.
And they would all go, oh yeah, 99 times out of 100 they'd go, we think you're right. It was a big fish, not a whale. So how can
Yeah.
you confuse a fish with a whale? Well, if it's
Yeah.
a basking shark, it's quite easy.
They're pretty big. Yeah. Yeah. It's larger than the average fish, that's for sure. Yeah. I
Absolutely,
think
yeah.
for us, one of the problems we have are when minke whales lunge feed, they're on their side. So then you see one half of their tail come up. And so
Yeah.
we repeatedly get reports of orcas when this is happening because people think they've seen like an orca dorsal fin come up when they've seen the half of the tail sort of thing. And
That
so,
that happens also with fin
yeah.
whales.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
the fin whales, or finbacks as you probably call them, they're
Yeah.
turning on their right side, and then that
Yes.
forces their tail, their
Yep. Just
fluke
that
to
little
lift
edge and
up.
it's so clean. Yeah.
Oh, and I mean,
Yeah.
every time you see it, you kind of go, I can see where the
Yeah.
confusion
I totally can.
lies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've never seen that with a minke whale, but we see that all the time with fin whales.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? But yeah, same kind of problem.
So on most of your orcas, are they, see the way I said orcas there? Uh,
Yes, good for
uh,
you.
That didn't come easy. Are most of them fish eating or mammal feeders?
Yes. I think ours are opportunistic. So the craziest things we see them doing are feeding on other marine mammals. So usually minke whales are getting the worst of it, but sometimes we've had fin whale calves also. And we certainly have humpback calves that have some significant scarring on their tails where they've been grabbed and, moms probably ran them off. But there are times when they are in the area and the other whales are quite happily just continuing what they're doing. And so you have to wonder if when the orcas are present during those times, are they feeding on fish specifically? And that's why the other whales are not sort of scattering. So very often when the orcas are in the area, everybody else clears out, makes themselves pretty scarce for obvious reasons if they're whale hunters. And we still are very early in our cataloging in this area to sort of be able to figure out, is it that sometimes they're feeding on whales and sometimes they're feeding on fish, or is it that like the same group, or is it that some are fish eaters and some are whale eaters, and that's just how it is. So primarily what we see is that they are feeding on other whales, but sometimes they're in amongst the other whales and they don't seem to care that they're there at all. So you would have to wonder why that is, right? And I don't have an answer for that yet.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's
I mean, they are definitely a complicated killer.
they definitely are.
And yeah, I think that we sometimes have the Scottish West Coast Community Group coming down. There's only two of those individuals left now. But I mean, we've seen them here over the last 20 years, and it was only really last year we got footage of one of them, Aquarius, with what we were pretty sure was a common dolphin in its mouth. But it was just amazing that, we've loads of sightings of them going back several decades. And yet nobody had ever seen them hunting. It was almost like when they came here, they were on a fast or something. It was just really odd. And yet the up in the Minches up in Scotland, they've been seen taking minke whales when they were a core group of 9 individuals, but that's down to 2 now. So it's a little bit depressing that a group of 9 over a relatively short space of time is down to John Coe and Aquarius, 2 big adult males who are probably bulls in their they're probably in their early 60s now. So that is a group that's going to become extinct,
Yes, sadly.
But they will hopefully be replaced by other killer whales that'll come in and fill that ecological niche that their demise. But it is sad because they are what you would call the only resident native group of killer whales or orcas in anywhere in the British Isles, because you get lots of animals coming in from Iceland and from Norway, but they're probably Scandinavian killer whales, whereas these are native, predominantly spend their time circumnavigating the British Isles. So they are the only native group native to our waters, and they're you got to say their days are definitely numbered, which is a sad indictment,
It is. It really is, to watch numbers change like that and wonder, what could have been done or what the story is about why, and some of these things we'll never be able to answer, right? Which is, it's really hard sometimes. Yeah. So tell me, like, whales in your area. So you talked about ones coming from Scandinavia. So humpback whales in your area, I know, but why don't you tell everybody what's sort of happening with your whales? Where are they going to? Where are they coming from?
The question increasingly isn't where are they going, but it's where aren't they going?
I hear you. Yeah.
It would seem like 20 years ago when I did our first little plot of let's have a look at where our sightings, and you do a little map, and it's kind of a map of Ireland, the wider British Isles, and then maybe one or two outliers, like we had one in the North Sea. And then that map you needed to pull out a little bit because you were adding a few Icelandic animals and a few Scandinavian animals, like up to northern Norway. And then we started getting a few down around the Canary Islands,
Hmm.
down to Gibraltar. So that's giving us a nod towards where the breeding ground might be.
Hmm.
And certainly for the first couple of years, when we finally started to match them to the breeding ground, they were all West African animals. They were all Cabo Verde animals.
Hmm.
So it about over 20 years ago, our CEO Simon Barrow had this crazy idea based on old whaling records that he had read some of the old books, and the Norwegian whalers talked about their Norwegian humpbacks going down off West Africa,
Hmm.
and mentioned the Cabo Verde. So we kind of thought, well, if we're to try and find any matches to the sort of dozen or so humpbacks we had in Ireland, let's go down and look at the Cabo Verde. So
Hmm.
we had about 3 or 4 expeditions down there, including filming trips. And my colleague Connor Ryan did a PhD, and he spent a lot of time down there. But really, we were really unsuccessful, and we started kind of almost giving up on looking for the birthplace of these Irish humpback whales. Of course, they're not Irish because they're not born here. They're
I
only
know
here
it's the
for
same for ours.
yeah, they're only here for
Yeah.
feeding purposes.
Yeah. Like their
But
passports would say something different, right?
yeah, for sure. But
Yeah.
but then we got one. Was at number 43 rocked up, found down in Boa Vista and the Cape Verdes, and it was almost like waiting for the proverbial bus. It seemed once one appeared down there, it was almost
Hmm.
like they had permission to reveal themselves, and it seemed every 6 months we were getting another and another and another. So we
Yeah.
ended up with like over 10 animals, and they were all from the Cape Verdes. But of more recently, then you guys entered the picture because um we started with number our famous
Yeah.
animal number
Trophies.
11 on the
Yeah.
catalogue,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
of Hookhead in County
Hmm.
Wexford in the southeast of Ireland. And
Yep.
as you alluded to, he rocked up with you, and
Hmm.
then as a result of a
Social
lot of
media.
collaboration, yeah,
Yep.
he same animal turned up off the Challenger Bank of Bermuda.
Hmm.
So I loved the idea that we had a nice little triangle there between
Hmm.
Ireland, 3 points, Ireland,
Yeah.
Newfoundland, and Bermuda. But as a colleague pointed out to me, when he said, "Oh, you each at you," he said, if you've got any 3 points, you're always going to get a triangle." But I said, "Oh yeah, I suppose you're right there." But it's a particularly nice triangle. Some
Yes, it
triangles
is
are
very. Yeah.
horrible isosceles triangles, but no, it was a great story. And I suppose you've got, it's just, it's a really good example of the importance of international collaboration, because
Absolutely.
the story starts with the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group here in Ireland. It ends really with Roger Etchbury, but right in the middle of that, you got the North Atlantic Humpback Whale Catalogue, you got
Yeah.
Sea of Wales, and you
Yeah.
got Wales Bermuda. So
Yeah.
it's a lovely way, I guess, of talking a bit about, that wonderful collaboration between commercial operators,
Hmm.
and science, and it's a brilliant model. It really is. And I
Hmm.
know this, having managed a whale watching boat down here in West Cork for 10 years, where I worked closely with Colin Barnes and the Holly Joe with
Hmm.
Cork Whale Watch. But sometimes boat operators get a bad reputation because they see the dollar sign fluttering under their eyelids. But if you get an operator who's really passionate about marine conservation and who work with researchers, it's a great model. It really is. And well, you know that better than anybody.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to realize, and I talk about it on the boat every day. We have a data set like we have. It's very extensive because someone else is paying for us to be on the water every day. Where research teams are only here for, a week or 2 weeks, or sometimes if they're really likely a month or 2 months at the summer season. And they get great data, but we're here for longer, and it's not, we're having someone else fund that for us. So grateful every day that we have the opportunity to do that, and then feel responsible for logging data when we're out there so that we do have a more complete picture of what's happening here. So I think it's a good mix, when you can make it happen, for sure.
Yeah, I mean that longevity of the data is just what enables you guys, and I guess us as well in Ireland, tell a good story about whales, because some of
Mhm.
these animals, it's as Simon Barrow would say, it's almost like they develop personalities, and you see
Absolutely. Yeah.
little idiosyncrasies in whales that are kind of unique to that one individual, and you can only tell that story if you've watched that animal over decades. And
Yeah.
students come and go, and interns and PhD students, and they get their PhD and they go off and they do something imminently more sexy or more exciting. Not that there's
Yes.
anything more exciting than whales, but they go off and they study turtles in Hawaii or something like that.
Mhm.
But it's that longevity of the fact that you guys are there every season, and you try and pay for a platform, a boat
Yeah.
platform, a research platform, and you're going to get a big bill of hundreds of
Yeah.
thousands of dollars at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Whereas you guys, you probably keep a slot for a local researcher, and that sort of, just sharing your platform with
Mhm.
researchers is really
Mhm.
invaluable. And look, your data set is bigger than the Irish humpback whale data set, and we've been doing this for nearly 30 years.
Yeah,
But it
and we're
just
just
goes to
one
show.
operator. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, for
Yeah.
sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, so boat operators and research, it's a brilliant partnership. It really is.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. And thanks for recognizing that, because sometimes I think, like you said, people don't always understand that. So that's really important. Um, what are some of the most, I know we've talked about some of them already, but what are some of the most interesting or memorable findings you've had throughout your time there?
Findings. Well, I suppose the well, I mean, for us, a really big one was finding out where our humpback whales were actually born was a really
Absolutely.
important
Yeah.
one. We still have absolutely no idea where minke whales or fin whales are born, which is remarkable. I mean, the fin whale is practically the largest creature on the planet, and I don't
Uh-huh.
think anybody knows where they're born on either your side of the Atlantic or our side. And I just find that
Or somewhere
mind-boggling.
in the middle. They could be all, who knows, right? Yeah.
It is just
Definitely. Yeah.
crazy. Like, presumably assuming finbacks are a little bit like humpbacks, that they're going to warmer areas. I mean, these are big animals. How
Yeah.
can we miss, you know, 75 to 80-foot pregnant female fin whales? I mean, even their babies are like 25 to 30 foot long. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that to me has got to be one of the great, you know, somebody doing a PhD should set out and go, I am going to do one thing in my PhD. I am going to
Yeah.
find out where these darn whales are born.
Mhm.
But we can tell you, lots about our humpback whales because they're easy. Let's face it, humpback whales, they have, they just lend themselves to
Mhm.
study in a
Yeah.
way that maybe fin whales and minke whales don't. But the other second interesting thing we found was, that we are recording some of our animals, obviously down off the Dominican Republic, and
Mhm.
we've got Guadalupe, the Dominican Republic, and also obviously your whale off Bermuda,
Mhm.
our number 11. So, but most of our humpback whales are Cabo Verde, our West African breeding animals.
Mhm.
Um, I suppose sometimes it's simple things like, um, we 20 years ago felt that where I live now down in West Cork on the south coast, had almost a monopoly on fin whale sightings.
Mhm.
And we had fin whales arriving sometimes in big groups, like, a dozen, 20 animals arriving. And our sense was they arrived en masse in
Mhm.
like late May, early June, and they kind of then broke up into smaller feeding parties. And then before they left, they amassed into a big group as well. And then it was almost like they swam off the face of the earth and they just vanished. But it was
Yep.
when colleagues of mine started picking up fin whales 2 or 3 days after we lost them here.
Mhm.
And then we went out and photographed them, and we realized we were photographing the same dorsal fin. So it was a
Yeah.
simple thing that
Yeah.
we only matched them about 150 kilometers east of where I live. But it was just a wonderful, small, local example of
Yeah.
no, when your whales leave your area, believe it
Mhm.
or not, they are going somewhere else. that's
Yeah.
probably not too far from where you are. And we
Yeah.
just thought this was mind blowing because this was our own little discovery. And now we're getting our humpback whales are rocking up everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you kind of just get blasé about it almost. But sometimes it's the small discoveries. I mean, when you get a new species for Ireland, like we had a bowhead whale in 2015, we've had a dwarf sperm whale, we've had the narwhal only a couple of months ago. So
Mhm.
these are the sort of interesting, discoveries. But, a lot of them aren't really discoveries. They're just dead things washing up on your beach, so it's hardly a discovery.
But you didn't know it was
But
there until it washed up, right? That's the
yeah,
thing.
and it was
So,
probably reported as a harbour porpoise or something wrong.
yes.
So
Yeah.
that's what the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group does. We just bring an element of, say, rigor
Yes.
to the biological recording of
Yeah.
sightings and strandings. And it's the fact that we have this really interesting data set now, and we are the go-to group in Ireland for this data. And it's just we've been very successful in we kind of wrote the book in Ireland in terms of digital biological recording, like we would have been the first NGO that had a website with a reporting portal where members of the public could go on rather than filling in a hard copy data sheet and posting it with a stamp in the corner and giving it to the postman. That was fine 30 years ago, but obviously in the modern age, it's not really going to wash. And now we're into our second version of the app which we have out there. But yeah, listen, there's always, every year, there's always 2 or 3 really interesting sightings. I guess one really nice one that Simon had when he was down on one of his last trips to the Cape Verdes was during July, at a time when all of the Northern Hemisphere humpback whales should be well up north, feeding up off Ireland or Scotland or Iceland, Norway. He was down there in July with one of his students, and he found humpback whales in July. He had heard this report, and he was going, what the hell? The breeding season is kind of over by May. So all the females who have had calves down there a couple of weeks ago, they're all, if not, they're all tracking north back to you or to us. But months later, Simon was down there and he heard this report. So he went to the area and he found 1 or 2 or 3 humpback whales. And as soon as he saw them, he kind of said, they're different. And it was that their pectoral fins were dark rather than white. So he knew that they were Antarctic humpback whales. So he managed to get a biopsy sample with a hollow crossbow, and he had a license to take a skin biopsy. So this was the first hard evidence, and the DNA came back to say that the sequencing, the genetics proved that they were not Northern Hemisphere, they were Southern Hemisphere.
So then they're opposite season than ours.
Opposite seasons. So it's one of the few places on the planet where you've got both hemisphere humpbacks. So it's kind of put the Cape Cabo Verde on a, like, I don't know if any place in the in the Caribbean records that. I don't know if that's been documented in Hawaii. Now, somebody might correct me if it has, but it's one of the few places on the planet where you've got both hemisphere populations. And I guess it's not entirely possible. Some data you'll have a really late female staying on, and you might well have really early Southern Hemisphere Antarctic animals coming
there.
And maybe they mix, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But it certainly makes it very diverse. One problem with the Cape Verde population is that there's only about 200 plus humpbacks left. It's a very small remnant population compared to the Caribbean, which has 12,000 plus. Now, if even every couple of years you've got an inflow of these Rastafarian humpbacks, with the big Bob Marley hats, and they're rocking over to the Cape Verdes. Genetically, you have to say it's probably not a bad thing. They are going to get outdone by the it's a numbers game. They will be outbred by the genetically dominant Caribbean population. So in terms of mixing, you could say it's great for biodiversity and diversity within the population, but it also probably means that the Caribbean animals will very likely outbreed that bloodline, if you like, of the West African, because they are only clinging on there. They are a remnant
Yes.
population,
Yeah.
because there was a lot of whaling going on down in the Cabo Verdes,
Hmm.
back with the Basque whalers, and it was just one
Yes.
of those really important areas for whaling on this
Hmm.
side of the pond. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it is all interesting, but there's never
Yeah.
a dull day.
No, never. I was not aware of that, so that's amazing. I will do some reading on that. So thank you. And fin whales, I know I feel the exact same way about them. I feel like they have this air of mystery about them because we don't know a lot about their whole life cycle. And so as a result of that, number one, if you're going to protect a population, you need to know where they breed, where they feed, where they calve. And we're missing two of those pieces of information, which is a lot and in something that's that big and that's significant. We have a 30 plus year data set of fin whale ID records that I have never gone through. Just we continue to collect it, and at some point we will get there. But I mean, it's so much. They're so much harder to match. They're not as easy. They don't broadcast their identity every time they dive like a humpback or a sperm whale does, and so it is a lot more tricky. And then I think they probably spend a lot of their life in the deep ocean, which would be crazy expensive. So yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's really interesting when you
It,
look at
it,
that, why hasn't there been more
Yeah,
work?
we have a catalog that I started to work on, because like yourselves, when people sent us wonderful pictures, yeah, we filed them away in a
Hmm.
sensible way. And there was winter 3 years ago. I had a little bit of free time, so I said, no, with one of my colleagues, Andrew Malcolm, I'm going to have a look at these, and we put them into some a catalog that made a little bit of sense. And you give each animal a line on Google
Hmm.
Drive with its data history.
Yeah.
And we had really good interannual resightings here. So we were getting quite a few animals that were really well marked.
Hmm.
And it wasn't always notches on the dorsal fins. Sometimes they were animals that had been ship struck. Sometimes there were
Yeah.
animals with big, horrible, or quite likely cancerous growths on them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it is frustrating for people, because you're always asking people to send you images, and then they send you these gorgeous images of fin
Hmm.
whales, and you go, well, we're not really interested. But fin whales, you don't want to do pretty. You're looking at, these really lovely shots, close, perfectly in focus, but they're just not focusing really on the dorsal fin area. So it really is a problem. You can have lots of people sending you images, and then they can get frustrated because we're not giving you chapter and verse on their life history.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, as you say,
They're not the
I
same
would
as the other
say
ones.
only about one in every five fin whales has a really well marked dorsal fin. And
Yeah.
it's remarkable how many of those well marked dorsal fins are identical. They've got these big notches on the
Hmm.
base of the trailing edge. And
Hmm.
how do they all end up with notches in the same place? And the exact same sort of a notch is a real
Yeah.
mystery to me. But
Yeah. But then you
fin-
start comparing chevrons and you're like, wait a minute, you're not the same, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
tricky.
And of
It's
course,
tricky.
nowadays you got a new generation. Of course, up to now, it's all been, people out in boats taking pictures of the dorsal fins. And now you
Hmm.
got people who are droning them. So they are getting these wonderful shots of the chevrons, or the
Yes.
pale
Yeah.
wash behind the blowhole, or
Hmm.
marks on the head. So now we potentially have two parallel catalogs. You've got the dorsal fin catalog, because you've really no way of knowing if somebody's got great blazing chevron
Right
shots.
from that angle. Yeah.
Are any of those animals already? So you end up with like parallel
Hmm.
fin whale catalogs.
Yeah.
So listen, there's a good reason why every PhD wants to study easier species like humpback whales, and
Absolutely.
fin whales are just difficult. They really are. But the greyhound of the sea, it is, watching lunge feeding fin whales on the surface is just an amazing
It's awesome. There's
that
no other word. Yeah.
biomechanical force, and
Hmm.
how they can stop on a tuppenny piece
Yeah.
using their jaw, which just opens, and they can break right in the middle of a bait ball of sprat or herring. It's just a
Yeah.
gorgeous thing to see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I'm forever impressed by them, to be honest. And someday we'll get cataloging them and maybe we'll have a better idea. Listen, if we have humpback whales going from here to you, like you see how fast a fin whale can get across a bay or go somewhere. I mean, they are the greyhounds of the sea. So it's not inconceivable to think that we're sharing those whales too, and where
No,
they're
and
going when they're not
I
in
mean,
either
we
area.
do have one very quickly on. I mean, it was the Portuguese group down in the Western Algarve asked us because they were getting a couple of fin whales, so they asked us to share the catalogue with them, which they did. But one of them was a definite. It had a complete, almost like a bullet hole right in the middle of its dorsal
Whoa.
fin, which I'm sure was probably a parasite, but it was a clear match. So we have
Yeah.
already now matched one of them with the Western Algarve. Now you don't have to go down too much further south of the Algarve and you're off West Africa type thing, you know. So
Yeah.
it is again lending ourselves to this latitudinal north-south migration, but we you know it is a lovely mystery as to where
Yeah.
they're going, but presumably they are going down to warmer latitudes. But yeah, the greyhound of the sea, a wonderful animal.
Yeah. I know College of the Atlantic, someone named Dan Dandanto used to have, or was working on not a sperm whale catalog, a fin whale catalog. And so you know, I've always thought maybe I'll prepare my data and send it to them and see, like we do with our humpback data, and just see what happens. You never know, right? But I mean, with the chevron and the blaze and, you know, all of those markings, it's so dependent on like having great lighting, and you know what it's like working out there. I mean, some days you just don't have it. You just
No.
don't, and you can't see
Yeah.
enough of it to, you know, make it a definitive match. And so again, you know, the reason why everybody's not working on fin whales, it's tricky, right? It's really hard.
Yeah, it is. And there's so much variability, even within season. I remember photographing a fin whale down here, and we decided we'd call it Europa because I had this perfect map of Europe on its flank. And I saw it 4 months later, and I'm going, well, Europe is now far more like South America. And it's just that their skin is constantly sloughing off. So
Yeah.
even though they might seem, when you get that brilliant backlit photograph and you can see all the blazes and the chevrons and all the pigmentation changes, that could be gone in a matter of weeks. So it's completely, in terms of photo ID, it's, you know, interannually, it's useless.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. It's so crazy. I know.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain sometimes when some of the other species are so easy, right? That, yeah, these guys just kind of like fly under the radar all the time.
But like there is definitely, I mean, you probably heard about our right whale that we had here in July 2024. I mean, it's a century since a right whale has been photographed in Irish waters, and it was on the fencing deck of a Norwegian whaling station off County Mayo.
So not a proper sighting, really.
So yeah, lovely sighting. Caught it breaching. We weren't sure at the start, was it a bowhead whale? But then again, it became very clear once we got to see the callosities on the head, and it was clearly wasn't a bowhead. So we had our first. It wasn't the first for Ireland, but certainly it was the first record that we had validated, and as far as we know, quite likely the first record of a North Atlantic right whale in over a century in Ireland. So we sent those images anyway off to Lindsay, who jumped ship on us. She went over to the dark side.
She's
She
over
went
at the right whale people now.
She left humpbacks and she went over to work with our colleagues in the aquarium, the New England aquarium. So we shared all the stuff with them, the images and the video, and they came back and they ran it through their catalog, and they said, well, the footage isn't great, but it was only when we actually got video footage later that evening that she said, oh, no, we can really work with this. And they immediately went to running it through their catalog of well, it's not extensive because let's face it, we only 300 or 400 animals, and they came back pretty much the next morning to say, no, we cannot match this whale with our catalog.
No.
So great news. We got it's a new right whale for the catalog. So that was great. And then last November, they were flying CCS, the Center for Coastal Studies. You probably have some relationship with them. They were flying, and they were 23 nautical miles east of Boston, and they found an area with humpbacks, and their funding was for right whales, so they weren't all that interested. But in the area where there were humpbacks, they kind of said, well, we'll check it out. They found a right whale. So immediately the guys from CCS sent the funding pictures straight away down to base, and they came back and they said, no, we can't match this on the CCS catalog. And then they decided the day after, oh, we'll send the images off to our colleagues in the New England Aquarium, and they came back and said no, no match either. And then some bright spark remembered, wasn't there this one animal off Donegal in Ireland last July? And they said, you're right. And they looked it up, and bingo, that was our whale. So from northwest Donegal Bay to 23 nautical miles east of Boston, and they've subsequently seen it since. They saw it this February just gone. So now we've got sightings of it, Donegal, Ireland in 2024, and off the East Coast in 2025 and 2026. So there's an even rarer example of a match. And it was the first time ever. I mean, they've had a few right whales from your side of the Atlantic match up, but this was the first time they had an animal
the opposite way.
that originated of the Atlantic and that matched with your side of the pond. So it was a really significant sighting. And they've just, what they actually do is they get an artist to come in. I think Dave is his name. And they've just showed us the artist's impression of that whale. So the aerial shot where they put in all the callosities and all the, the linear scars. And so we now have the profile of that, the aerial profile of that whale. But it's just, that is a great story. But, if we have one right whale in Ireland and we have managed to match it to the Boston area, there's plenty of opportunity. Who's to say we can't match some of our finbacks?
That's right. You never know. Well, we'll be talking because, challenge accepted.
Hey, if it was easy, and everybody would be doing it. And that's why everybody does humpback whales. I always say to people who are starting, IWDG don't do easy unless it's unless you're sitting on a cliff top and snot freezing on your nose and you're bloody miserable. You're doing something very wrong. There's got to be an element of being miserable in it.
Yes, right. Yeah. It's not easy sometimes working out in the field. That's for sure. For you, for this summer, I know you were telling me a little bit earlier that you're seeing some changes. So what kind of changes are you seeing for this summer? And then what are you looking at in terms of what will you be doing throughout the field season?
Well, I think one of the changes we've noticed over 20 years is that species are arriving earlier. I would say basking sharks and humpback whales and fin whales tend to be arriving early. So 20 years ago, if we were having this chat, I would have said that our first animal of season would probably be, late August. We really never had humpback whales earlier than that. Now it's mid-spring, you would expect to see them from late March, almost the first of them. Now this year has been a complete a very peculiar year because we really haven't hardly had a single humpback whale sighting yet. We've had one record of 3 animals, but it was just, if you remove that outlier, our humpback whales, we are getting a little bit concerned that our humpback whales. Now, Padraig, who's one of our colleagues down in the Cabo Verde, has said this year their males arrived very late. In the Cabo Verde breeding area. So I guess it's possible if the males were arriving late, well, then the whole breeding cycle was delayed. So it may just mean that they were all late leaving. But that's kind of bit of speculation on my part. We're kind of just looking for hopeful excuses, but there's nobody else here really saying, oh yeah, we're getting lots of humpback whales, in which case, photo ID would probably tell us that they were our Irish animals. But nowhere, none of our colleagues in Scotland or England, they're not really talking about seeing lots of humpback whales rocking up. And for us, lots of humpback whales is 3 or 4 animals. For you, it's probably 300 or 400 animals. You're talking about different scales here. But so we are a little bit concerned that our humpbacks are very, very late this year. Now, whether they did come through here and they didn't like what they saw in terms of availability of forage, and they decided, oh, well, bugger that, we're going to continue on. If that's the case, well, then it's deeply depressing, but we just don't know yet. I mean, climate change is changing lots of things down here, and everybody says the same thing. Even our fishery scientists would say all our fish species, everything is tracking north. And talking to people like Fred Wenzel on your side and down in the States, he'd say all the fish biologists are saying the same thing. Everything, Menhaden, everything is tracking further and further north, presumably looking for colder and colder water, you know? But yeah, that's kind of a big thing for us. But even our minke whales aren't here in numbers. Like I like only not so long ago, I remember going out on a 4-hour trip and counting 70 minke whales in a 4-hour trip. Like, really impressive numbers that you will probably appreciate. But there's very few places in the world where you can go out on a 4-hour trip to the point where you almost give up. You're counting minke whales in dolphin numbers, just silly numbers. That seems, that's only like 5 to 10 years ago, but that almost seems now like a lifetime ago for me.
It's the same
we are losing a lot of our biomass of whales, and it's just, you ask everybody, our coastal inshore waters are becoming barren, and that is a depressing thing to say. And it would seem to me, I'm wondering, why are our waters so good for basking sharks and yet becoming increasingly not great forage habitat for whales? And you know, stop me if you think this is crazy, but what do all these forage fish feed on? You know, what do millions and billions of herring or sprat or sand eels or, you know, menhaden in your case, where capelin, whatever forage fish attract your whales? Well, they're all swimming around in massive shoals, and they're feeding on plankton, zooplankton, which is like copepods and larval, you know, larval forage fish.
Everything.
But everything. So if the young of everything is essentially zooplankton, and what feeds on the young of everything is largely gone, well, then you end up with, you know, masses of primary productivity out there in terms of copepods and little jellies, and there's nothing to feed on them. So you quite conceivably are looking at an explosion in a sea that's basically only got plankton left in it, zooplankton. And who does that benefit? Well, whales don't eat plankton. Basking sharks feed on plankton. So I'm just kind of wondering, and I'm sure there's marine ecologists out there who will say, well, that's probably quite a simplistic way, but until somebody gives me a different explanation as to why our waters have become so productive, such rich feeding habitat, I would say we need to explore, is it because there's no small pelagic shoaling fish left, or we've certainly wiped them out? And why have we wiped them out? We've wiped them out so we can convert them into fish meal to feed salmon in fish farms up in Norway and Scotland and the like. So I think we are, in effect, starving our marine megafauna, our wild native animals, to feed animals in fish farms. Whatever is happening here, there is lots of food for basking sharks, and it would seem that our waters are no longer attracting our humpbacks, our fin whales, and even our minke whales in ways that we had down here only 10 years ago. So in even the last decade, I can sense, and I'm talking to anglers, I'm talking to commercial fishermen, sailors. I got sailors saying to me, God, when we sailed along the Cork coastline, it was like wall-to-wall dolphins, and we'd see spouting whales every day. What's happened? And it's happened over a relatively short space of time. So for whoever is listening, just because you have them now doesn't mean you'll have them tomorrow. So take good care of them.
That's right. That's an excellent point. There are so many kind of scary changes happening, and I think you, like you said, try to come up with reasons why this might be happening, being cautiously optimistic about, oh, it could be this or it could be that. And you just hope that it's a short-term change and not a long-term change, right? Because it's scary to think about what could happen, you know?
Big changes are you guys seeing? I mean, is any of this resonating with what you're seeing on the ground?
I would say I'm up on my 28th season here whale watching, and I choke on that because I in my head I'm still only 28 years old. um, and I remember my first like say 10 or 15 years here. There was literally a minke whale in every cove. And now we might see a couple of minkies, maybe three in an entire day, and that would be, a good day in terms of Mankey sightings. And, you have to wonder, is there, there have been um, commercial whaling quotas that included minke whales. And we, again, with minkies, don't know where they're breeding and calving. So, they can travel really fast. They can travel really far. Are they being targeted by whaling in other places, and that's why we're seeing such a decline in numbers, or is it something else in the system that's causing that? And I don't have an answer for that one. you know
Yeah,
um
yeah.
we are seeing this year we've had two mother calf pairs in and out of the area for a couple of weeks now. We would normally see moms and calves at the end of the season. Why are they here? Are they this year's calves, or are they last year's calves? And
Are
it's
these
really hard to
humpbacks?
know. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And so if they were this year's calves and the moms had to come up sooner because they were starving, you would think that, mom would be looking pretty skinny, so you can see that top line where the vertebrae are sticking out. We don't see that. So
Mm,
why are you here so early?
mm,
And, to be holding up in an area for as long as one pair has been, it's really interesting. She's been feeding on small herring right against the cliffs. So both lunge feeding and trap feeding. So where she just sits there with her mouth wide open,
mm.
which is sort of wild to see. While the calf, I feel like some days we were almost being used as a babysitter, like go over there and play with that boat while I'm over here feeding, kind of thing. Um, so definitely seeing things like that, definitely seeing a decline in the numbers of capelin. And I just recorded an episode with someone who studies the prey species here specifically, and talking about some of the work that they're doing, trying to figure out, what is happening with that and why aren't we seeing the same numbers as we were before. So kind of the same. I think, the species are different. Sometimes they're different, sometimes they're not in terms of, what these animals are eating as they move around the oceans. But the trends that we're all seeing, right? All the
Mm,
way across the
mm,
board.
mm.
And, solving those problems may be, a lot, they're going to be different reasons for decline in each species, or maybe it's something that's a much wider issue that, we don't see yet. But it's scary to think about the changes we're going to
Mm.
see. I
For-
know when Lindsay changed from doing the humpback cataloging to doing the right whale cataloging, I said to her, if the projections are right, you and I will be working again together before we know it, kind of thing.
Mm.
So, there have been a couple of right whales that have shown up in this area, but they don't stay very long, and they're sort of anomalies, I think. But as the water warms, like you said, these species are going to go further and further north to
Mm.
find the optimal cooler temperatures, and eventually
Yeah,
there
yeah,
won't be anywhere further north to go, right? So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
You
it's
mentioned capelin there. Are those capelin being targeted for the plate or for processing into fish meal?
so I think originally they were mostly fished for the roe,
Okay.
for the plate. And when I first started here in 99, if the catch was too high a percentage of males, then they would just dump it. Now we're not seeing that anymore. And I think it's being used for fish meal as well as, so they separate out the males and females, and they have very different pathways, where they're going and how they're being processed. So at least it's not being wasted.
Mm.
But yeah, it's very different. And then herring right now is very important, where the capelin are not in close to shore yet. The herring are an important species. So everything that we see feeding right now is feeding on herring. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the herring here, where we are in West Cork right now, I mean, that stock was considered to be endemic to the local area. And I know
Mhm.
Colin Barnes, when he was talking to the fishermen back in the 70s when they were doing a lot of the damage, he would say, like, because he had come from England, the south coast of England, and he would have been saying to them, I've seen this happen in the south
Mhm.
coast of England, and you're going the same way that we went 15, 20 years earlier in
Yeah.
England, and the herring never returned. And
Yeah.
Colin would always say that the herring, as are sprat, they're endemic to a local area. And the last herring were fished out here back in the late 1980s, and they have never recovered. And
Mhm.
there's been a Celtic Sea herring management board set up. There's been sort of zero quota for herring. They have been given absolute top protection, and there are still no herring. So the
Mhm.
ecology of herring is very similar to the ecology of sprat. And
Mhm.
Colin has been leading a one man, and now he's got lots of support. Everybody's jumping
Mhm.
on on this bandwagon,
Mhm.
save our sprat type thing,
Yeah.
myself included. But unless you protect the forage fish, and it's not just whales and dolphins, it's the seabirds, and it's
It's
all the
everything.
commercial species, it's everything.
Mhm.
Just actually a big conference yesterday, a marine protected area conference in
Mhm.
Cork, which was really, really interesting. But you know, we got a Europe has given us a designate. All European member states have to declare 30% of their waters marine protected areas by 2030, which I still think now, after 7 years, is very optimistic. But the
Mhm.
government is still saying, no, that we will be able to deliver this. And it should be a game changer because, the areas that we're going to designate on will be based on good data. And that's
Mhm.
why we're an evidence-based organization.
Yeah.
But we got to bring the fishing community on board. But they can see the writing on the wall themselves.
Yeah.
Fishing is dying an absolute death here, and it's the common fisheries policy in Europe. It's not necessarily the fishermen's fault.
Mhm.
The system has enabled them, fish out stocks, and a lot of our fish that's been taken out aren't even Irish boats, they're international boats,
Mhm.
because okay, we're a small terrestrial area, but we've got a very large coastline.
Mhm.
Irish waters represent something like 20% or something of all EU waters
Mhm.
are Irish.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do feel sorry for fishermen, but we just need to stop all large scale pelagic fishing, certainly in coastal waters, and give these small pelagics an opportunity to recover,
Mhm.
because there is a wider community outside of big pelagic pear trawlers,
Mhm.
and at the moment our waters are depressingly becoming quite barren.
Mhm.
But anyway, as whale watchers, we're an optimistic bunch, and you
Yeah.
never know. I keep saying it to people every time you go out onto the cliff tops, you never know. And we might be losing some of our whales, but on the plus side, we seem to be gaining species that are, every couple of years we get a new species, and
Yeah.
who knows, maybe the next sighting of dolphins that are reported to us will be false killer whales or
You
something
never know.
really super exciting. So you never know what you're going to see. Well,
Mhm.
whale watching is and I don't need to tell you this, but I mean, I probably now at this stage do most of my whale watching from shore, and just
Yeah.
sitting there with a scope or a pair of binoculars, watching out and watching distant vapor plumes on the horizon. It's still probably the thing that brings me most joy, sitting on land or out in a boat and watching a whale, and knowing that it's Monday, everybody else is in the office, and you're out, and you're the only
And this
person
is
who's
my office.
and,
Yeah.
and this is
Yeah.
my office, and I am the only person who's likely to see this whale. Of course, with
Yeah.
social media, that doesn't happen nearly as much now as it used to.
Mhm.
But anyway, it has been an amazing journey, and for me, it
Mhm.
started in Canada. So thank you, Canada.
Awesome. Amazing. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I think it's so important for people to understand that even though it is a big ocean, these animals travel so far, and the problems that we have are not unique to the areas that we're in. In most cases, it's something that we're all seeing. So it's really important to talk about it and talk to each other.
Yeah,
And so, I really, really appreciate you talking to me today. And I cannot wait to hear about when you see your first humpbacks this season, because they're coming.
we
I can feel
we will
it.
let you know. Okay, listen, it's been lovely to talk, and keep up the good work and the passion.
Thanks so much. You too. Take care.